Hey folks, how you doing? This is Paul. Folks, I put a link over here on this video, and you don't know how much I want to just take it and show it to you on my other cell phone, but I can't do that because you go bye-bye. You understand? That's the way this works. That's the way the pattern has been set. There is one answer, and there's one answer that they're going to force you into, and you don't have a right to talk about anything else. I'm going to actually put two videos on here because there's a nurse that is suing Methodist Church, Methodist Hospital in Houston, and we are going to put that one up next. And it's about time that you mindless dolt retards out there start saying, that's really funny. Why are they trying to force us into this? Well, they're not really forcing us, because if you want to work, nobody's going to force you to work. If you don't have to get on an airplane if you don't want to. Mindless retards like this. You should have been the first ones to come out and support what we're doing, but you're not. You're just mindless dupes. Everybody's have their choice, right? How many people I talk to like that? They don't even know what they're talking about. Later. Enjoy the link. Click it below.
Kim, what's on your radar?
Well, I'm angry. I'm not going to lie. I'm really, really angry right now. So I'm just going to do a little rant to get this off my chest. Right now, everywhere we look, people have COVID. Vaccinated or not, everyone seems to be catching the virus with a whopping 800,000 new cases per day. Because Omicron is spreading like wildfire throughout the country, indiscriminately infecting anyone it comes into contact with, some serious failings by our public health officials, the CDC, Fauci, our politicians, and the mainstream media are becoming glaringly obvious, to the point where I think their failings rise to the level of crimes against humanity. The scientists and health experts, the people responsible for guiding us safely and scientifically through this pandemic, have been hyper-focused on vaccines. They raced towards a vax, told us to hunker down and wait for the vax. When it became available, they told us to get the vax. Then all the discussion centered around the awful people who refused the vax. So then they mandated the vax. And throughout this entire time, which is now at 2 years in, they've never focused on, and often, which is why it rises to the level of a crime, even shut down discussion surrounding the well-known scientific principle of natural immunity. They shut down and even demonized any discussion of potential early treatments, and they failed to give us good instructions on what to do when our loved ones or we ourselves catch COVID. They flat out refused to focus on any of this. They instead swore if we all got the vaccine, the pandemic would end. Well, it didn't end. Everyone is catching COVID. People who got double vax and triple vax and wore double masks and kept their kids out of school and gave up Christmas with family, and even worse, gave up being with their loved ones by their side as they breathed their last breaths because they weren't allowed to be next to them, are catching COVID. Everyone is catching COVID. And as people are catching it, they're starting to realize they have no tools left in their toolkit. Somebody tell me, what are you supposed to do when you catch COVID? Seriously, can you answer that question? Besides quarantining yourself and wishing you were vaccinated more than you already are, what are you supposed to do? Do you isolate yourself away from your family and fight the virus alone while hoping and praying you don't need to go to the hospital? Because that's what they've left us with. Why don't we know more about natural immunity and how long it lasts? With so many people getting sick, wouldn't it be helpful to know whether or not people who have already recovered can take on the task of caring for their loved ones who are now ill? The Israelis came out with an enormous study showing natural immunity afforded 13 times more protection against reinfection than vaccination. But quickly, the CDC released its own highly flawed study, claiming the opposite, that previously infected people were more likely to catch the virus than those vaccinated. Now, wouldn't it be nice to know which study is right? Wouldn't it be nice to know how long natural immunity lasts? Wouldn't it be nice to know if you do get reinfected, whether or not the disease is more or less severe? Signs point towards previous infection being protective to some degree, in the least lessening symptoms when reinfected. And what about the natural immunity younger people seem to have? We've known throughout the pandemic that young people often have very mild illness when infected. But again, the mere mention that they maybe should be less afraid of catching the virus was met with fierce resistance. So here we are now. We have people sick, and yet young and old and previously infected alike are all equally scared. And now people who are sick in bed with COVID who can't get themselves water or Tylenol or food to eat are reliant on the brave in their families to care for them, if they're lucky enough to have someone brave at all. COVID can often be so debilitating, people can't get themselves out of bed for even the most basic of needs. Frightened people who otherwise maybe wouldn't need to be frightened because they're younger or previously infected are hiding away and leaving food on doorsteps for loved ones, expecting them to crawl out of bed and care for themselves. And often people don't get the care they need until they've gotten so bad they need hospitalization? Why don't we have more info on who is perhaps safest to care for others in the family? If you can't get water to stay hydrated, Tylenol to get your temperature down, someone to run a humidifier or to get you food, how can you successfully fight off a virus? I suspect many people didn't get the early care they needed because people were too frightened to be around them, and they wound up in the hospital or even worse. And speaking of early treatment, again, no honest discussion or research has been earnestly put into trying to determine what could give a person a better fighting chance. Many early treatments that maybe weren't 100% effective, but reduced severe outcomes by 30% or 40% or 50%, which is better than nothing, were demonized as conspiracy theories before anyone put any real effort into studying them. I can guarantee you right now that anyone sick in bed with COVID will take a treatment that gives them even a 10% better chance of reducing symptoms than nothing at all. But that's pretty much what we've been left with. Nothing at all. Even monoclonal antibodies, a treatment that seemed to work, has been suppressed in the vaccine or bust movement. Yet here we are, people are fully vaccinated, even boosted, sick in bed, scared, and the best weapon our public health officials have given them against COVID is what? NyQuil? I say this as someone who, for the past 2 or 3 weeks, has been surrounded by and caring for people with COVID. Some vaccinated, some boosted, some unvaccinated. It doesn't matter. People are getting sick. I have been taking temperatures, checking oxygen, running humidifiers, and researching online what am I supposed to do, but the information is scarce. No one is giving us any idea of what we're supposed to do besides the Frontline COVID-19 Critical Care Alliance, and guess what? They're, of course, demonized. We're left waiting once again for another big pharma Pfizer solution, the early treatment pill, which does no one any good right now because we're waiting for it. This is what they've left us with. Millions of people are getting sick right now with no real idea of what to do except get your 4 tests from Biden and hope they come back negative. This lack of basic research and information on who is safest in our families to care for others, what treatment to give them when they're sick, and how to care for them to give them the best fighting chance is, in my book, a crime. These are health officials, they're scientists, they're doctors. They shouldn't be telling us to just hunker down and hope we never catch it. We need more information. They haven't given it to us, and worse, they've demonized any discussion of it. Now, I want to give you guys some examples that people have emailed into me. I myself, I'm currently in quarantine right now, caring for somebody positive with COVID. I've had COVID back in March of 2020. That was a long time ago. I suspect any minute now I'm going to test positive for the virus. I keep checking every single day I test, thinking today's the day I'm going to get COVID again. I haven't yet, but I will say that I've had people email in stories to me. A woman said that her 69-year-old woman, her aunt lives with her 40-year-old daughter. When the 69-year-old woman caught COVID, her 40-year-old daughter wouldn't let her back in the house because she was too afraid. Another one, a 68-year-old woman, luckily the family was smart. When she got COVID, they hid the father away who has cancer, but the adult hypertensive son took care of his mother while his sister, who had previously been infected, stayed away. And home care workers are reporting that they're showing up for their check-ins to find food left on doorsteps. Go inside and they find the person in fetal position, unable to get out of bed to care for themselves, to get water or Tylenol, let alone go pick up the food off the front steps. And if you're somebody who needs a home care worker, you're older. So this whole thing, we don't know what to do. And now everybody's getting COVID. And, people are hiding away. And I can tell you, as somebody who's been caring for somebody in their 70s with COVID for 3 days, it was scary because they were really sick. And I couldn't imagine what would have happened had they been left alone. I just think they would have ended up in the hospital because if you can't get water, you can't fight a virus. It's that simple. But here we are. What have they left us with? What are you supposed to do when you catch COVID? Does anybody know?
The thing I would agree with you there on is that they I don't know, the CDC, NIH, I don't know who, but they have not been good enough about putting together like a basic worksheet like you're talking about. It should not be so hard when you come down with COVID to find, okay, what are the things that people have done and how have they worked? And so then, right, you wind up on that site that wants to sell you hydroxychloroquine, or
they don't. FLCCC doesn't do hydroxychloroquine. It's an ivermectin kit with vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc, quercetin. It's an entire kit. But that's the only thing that you've got, and that is better than nothing. Because otherwise, literally, they're like, take some NyQuil, stay home, and hope you don't end up in the hospital. Call us if your oxygen drops below 90. I mean, that's like what that's what that's what doctors literally tell us.
Kim, but you said right, people would take anything that gives them like a 10, 20, 30% reduction. I mean, that's the vaccine, right? That's
right, but right
get
now
the
people are
vaccine.
getting
That's
sick.
what it gives you.
Hey, I'm telling you, I am taking care of people who are vaccinated and sick.
Right.
So it's not about that. People are getting vaccinated and they're still falling very ill. Maybe they're not ill enough to go to the hospital.
What I'm saying is they would have been more
ill.
ill. The thing that reduces they would have been more ill. Like that's what the vaccine offers you. And you're right. I wish there was more we could do. We should get the FDA should move quicker to approve all the other things. You're right that there's very little guidance. There's an elderly person in my family who was hospitalized and was hospitalized for something else, tested positive for COVID, and I was trying to like communicate to my family, well, what are they giving this person, the whatever therapeutics you're supposed to give them, but because this person wasn't hospitalized for COVID, wasn't clear that they were worried about it, and it was just very confusing. And then they released this person, like, but this is a very elderly person with COVID, and you're saying they can go home? What? So it's very confusing. It's very confusing.
I mean, look, like the people that are vaccinated, maybe they don't end up in the ICU, but they do still end up in the hospital oftentimes, especially if they're elderly people who live alone, which are millions of people that live alone, and they're not getting the care because their family members, their neighbors, people are too afraid to attend to them. And it just gets to the point where they need to be hospitalized. Do they get sick enough to go to the ICU? Are they going to die? No, but they need care, and no one's willing to do it. And that's because we're not given any guidance at all.
The next month or two, though, we're going to get a real test of how much natural immunity holds up, but also how much unvaccinated without natural immunity holds up as Omicron starts, ripping through the rest of the country. We've seen it in New York and D.C. and some places in the West Coast. But modelers are now saying that epidemiological modelers are now saying that we could be looking at another 50,000 to upwards of 300,000 more deaths between now and the end of March, as it kind of sweeps across the country. I hope those numbers are an exaggeration, but I don't think we should think of natural immunity as a strategy. I think you're right that we haven't. Right. We like in Europe, if you had natural immunity, that can count towards some of these vaccine requirements, which I think makes sense. Antibodies are antibodies, whether you buy them from a pharmaceutical company or you acquire them, unfortunately, naturally. But it's not necessarily a tactic that somebody would want to deploy because you don't know how it's going to.
But if you knew that you just recently caught COVID, let's say within the last 4 months, and then your mother, Ryan, like let's say your mother gets COVID and she needs somebody to care for her, wouldn't you rather be the one to sign?
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
No
question.
We don't know anything. But we don't know anything. They don't tell us anything. We don't know how long it actually
and you're right
lasts.
about that. And they downplay. You're right about that. They're unwilling. They being the public health establishment, their mainstream media allies, many Democratic political figures are unwilling to even concede that if you recover from a recent infection, it's akin to being vaxxed or boosted, and you're probably good. You should be the point of contact for someone who has COVID in your family. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's ridiculous that they overlook that.
Maybe they will now. I don't know.
Let's hope.
Well, good luck to you.
Now everybody's fine now. I'm just waiting for everybody to test negative so that I can continue to test negative and go home.
Hopefully you'll test negative. Maybe you wouldn't. All of a sudden, I know and on the show I've doubted reinfection because I felt like every time you really dig down into those, I think it was a lot of people who it was a false on one end or the other, or maybe they actually never recovered from their bout. But now we are hearing more cases I know to be genuine of people
including
who were
today
infected.
on the show.
Amy Tarkanian said she'd had it 3 times. That was the first 3 times. Ugh.
Yeah.
So no.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, but we just need to know more, right? We just need to know more.
Doctor suspended from Houston Methodist over her views on the COVID-19 vaccine. It's a story that made national headlines. And tonight, there's a new development. Dr. Mary Bowden announced today, with supporters right behind her, that she plans to file a lawsuit against the hospital system. KPRC 2's Mario Diaz live in the Upper Curry area with this legal move in his high-profile story. Mario.
Daniela, the attorney for Dr. Bowden, reached out to me here in the last 30 minutes. He says that the lawsuit has been filed. He doesn't expect it to post until tomorrow, though, officially due to the Dr. King holiday. But this all comes in response to what Dr. Bowden did 2 months ago, and that was speak up and question the way the COVID treatment and vaccination process was being handled.
Doctors can't be scared to question the narrative.
This is the position Dr. Mary Bowden says she and over 16,000 other doctors worldwide have had over COVID vaccines. Part of a shifting movement developing, she says, involving doctors who feel differently about the approach to early COVID treatment.
I think ivermectin needs to stop being such a dirty word. I don't understand why it's such a safe drug. I don't understand how it's become so controversial.
Dr. Bowden believes in ivermectin so much, she had her latest recipient stand beside her at a news conference this morning, fully recovered after recently providing her high-dosage tablets designated for humans.
The only people I work for are my patients, and I treat them the way I would want to be treated.
Now, 2 months removed from her suspension by Methodist and her resignation for publicly revealing her beliefs surrounding COVID treatments and vaccines, Dr. Bowden announced she is filing a lawsuit against Methodist.
Because they have not responded to my request for information, I've decided to take legal action against Methodist.
The case is to be filed within the next 24 hours, according to Bowden's attorney. And it boils down to Methodist not being transparent over COVID cases and the stats they have compiled involving the vaccine.
Two of their key core values are integrity and accountability, yet they won't share their data with us.
Oh my